Disney Plus brings together fans of all ages. This podcast brings three adults who are also kids at heart together to talk about Disney Plus. Join Scott, the Magic Genie producer, Regina, the sassy Megara of the group, and Nathan, the gentle but grumpy Brit, as they bring you news, reviews, special guests, and discussions on the Disney Plus Streamcast.
Hello and welcome to the Disney Plus Streamcast. I'm Scott Murray and I'm here with Regina Davis.
Hello, hello.
Hello, so I have a question for you.
Okay.
Excluding Star Wars and Marvel, can you look around the room you're in right now and see anything that's related to Disney?
Ooh, not my bedroom. No.
Okay.
No. Mm-mm.
Like in my case, I mean, Marvel and Star Wars are pretty heavy where I'm sitting, especially considering that my desk is a TIE fighter. So it's kind of hard to miss the Star Wars stuff. But on my left, I can see Ducky and Bunny, which I have to my left prominently displayed. And then just a little further down, I've got a Funko Pop, but also a plush of Elliot from the original Pete's Dragon.
Oh, right.
So
okay, so see, I think if you were in any other room, or if I was in any other room in my house, I could have answered that differently. My bedroom is pretty specifically curated to have kind of a Victorian thing going on, and so there's not a lot of really memorabilia of any kind.
Interesting.
But in the rest of the house, it's my bookshelves and all my trinkets and figures and comic books and everything else. So the rest of the house it's covered in Disney.
So is that just kind of an environmental mindset for just kind of where you want to be and when? It's like when you go to sleep, you don't want to be surrounded and thinking about fandom and having that right brain imagination going crazy. You want to go Victorian and relaxed and kind of an escape. And then when you want to step into it, it's easy to step into it because it's all over the rest of the house.
Yeah, because the rest of my house, I'm just overstimulated with all the basically cool stuff that I've collected. Whereas I really need to chill out in my room. Like, I'll bring stuff in if I'm going to, mess with it in my room, but then I'll take it back out.
They have to be invited.
Because it's just too distracting. I mean, I've got like a life-size cardboard cutout of Doctor Strange. I don't know if that needs to be in my bedroom.
Well, if you could kind of figure out a way to dress him up, I guess, in a little more Victorian.
I already tried to put him on the ceiling, Scott. The only thing I wanted doesn't work, so...
Well, it's been nice to get back together after a couple weeks off, but we needed that time to be able to talk about today's topic. Later on in the show, we are going to discuss Clone Wars Season 2, and there are very specific reasons as to why we're starting there and why we didn't just dive into 7, the most recent one that everybody was highly anticipating once Disney Plus came out. There's a reason for it, but if you're one of those people that has seen every single episode and you're completely up to date, but perhaps it's been several years since you watched Season 2, maybe this will be just kind of a fun revisit of that season, which came out, I believe, in 2009 and 2010. That's what we're going to talk about later on in the show. As usual, before we get to that, we have to get to some news, and I think there has been actually a few news stories, despite the fact that there may not be a whole lot going on around out there that isn't virus talk or closure talk. But to find out for sure, we need to ask somebody, which means we need to have what, Regina?
It's time for News with Nathan.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Better now that you're back.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm stuck in this house with my cat, and he's very fickle for the attention, all the rest of it, and he's never intimated he feels like that once about me. So to hear that, it really does warm the cockles of my heart. Thank you so much.
Is your cat named Goose?
My cat is named Jack.
Jack, okay.
He looks like
enough.
Goose. He looks like a flurkin. And in speaking to your Disney memorabilia bits and pieces, he's actually named after Jack Sparrow, one of my children named Mappa.
Okay.
So he's
cool.
always present. Yeah, always present.
I think all three of us do that then. We've all got pets that we've named after some fandom, right? So we have Jack, we have my dog, Kenobi, and you've done the same thing, Regina.
Yep, I've got Janeway after Captain Janeway and Philippa after Captain Philippa Georgiou, both Starfleet captains.
There you go.
Rock and roll. That's cool. I dig it. So yeah, like you said, there has been a few developments over the last couple of weeks. Just because you can't ignore it, we'll get the crappy ones out the way first. So Disney furloughed 43,000 people from Walt Disney World the other day. That's bad news. At least they get to keep their benefits. Obviously, COVID-19 and social distancing really, really hits the theme park industry. Who'd have thunk it? Star Wars alum Andrew Jack, he played Major Emmett in episode 8 and episode 7. He was also a voice coach. He used to work on dialects. He taught Juna Suotamo how to speak Shriwook. He's also worked with Chris Hemsworth, Robert Downey Jr. He passed away from COVID-19 complications, so that really, really sucks. There's a really nice tribute to him on his all over Twitter. If you look for him, Mark Hamill spoke about him. Sean Astin as well. He did dialect work on Lord of the Rings. He went into all sorts of praise regarding that guy. Andrew Jack, passed away. I think it was 76. We also heard that, and again, something that really hurt my heart, even though I was crossing my fingers, Black Widow, come on, Black Widow, get you onto Disney Plus. Not so much. It's going to be put back till November 6th. It's taking the Eternals cinema release date. Eternals is going to fall into 2021 now. Bob Iger said that he expects a few more movies actually to hit Disney Plus, though. Maybe not the big tentpole ones, but there's other things in their release schedule that just make sense to move them onto that service. First of which being Artemis Fowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So later on this year, we don't know when exactly. I guess some of the reasoning behind that, was that Disney was a little bit skeptical of what that would do in the box office, given that the last book-related one they did was Wrinkle in Time, and it wasn't so hot for them. And they think it's just a good...
Different, though.
Well, you know what? I think it's just a different fit, a better fit for their service.
Yeah.
They didn't say that, like you said, he's not going to do any of the tentpole ones that there's a spot for those, there's demand for those. But those smaller ones, because that release calendar gets a little bit congested, and as you know, those folks don't like to release movies from, the same kind of group of studios all at the same time because it cannibalizes their market share. They're going to look at doing that going forward. The full interview is in Barron's, so that was interesting. It gives you another reason to keep your subscription going if you didn't already have one from being stuck at home at the moment. Speaking of which, 8 million new Disney Plus subscribers paid from India went live on the service went live on April 3rd. Brings them up to 50 million subscribers all around the world. That's pretty fantastic numbers, and apparently they're leading the old streaming wars now. We're not surprised in this day and age. People love their Disney content. You need a little bit of the happy and the jolly, even if some of it is songs that you don't want to hear. There's a place for it right now. And I say that with gritted teeth a little bit because I don't know if you follow it like I follow it. Hashtag Disney Magic Moments on Twitter. Alternatively, if you go to news.disney.com/magic moments, they've done their best to throw a bunch of Disney park content onto that site just so you can kind of have that virtual Disney experience and have all the happiness and all the feels that you would normally get. So they have a montage of the various different parks that have It's a Small World doing the longest 3 minutes in your life of It's a Small World.
Ooh.
It's a bit much. There's also the Disney Magic Happens parade from Disneyland. They've got a Beauty and the Beast thingy on there from the Disney Cruise, a live performance. Something which I thought was super neat. They had the recipes for their churro bites and their Dole Whip, as well as they had new Olaf shorts. They're only a minute long because they're being worked on from home and voiced from home by Josh Gad, but they're on there. But also a bunch of story time things. And the story time bit is the bit that I loved because you have Daisy Ridley, Ashley Eckstein, which, we'll talk about her later on. Mm-hmm. Tony Hale, Paige O'Hara, all these great Disney stars, past and present, doing story time. The Ming Na one was awesome, picking a Disney book and reading that about 8-9 minutes long a piece, which I just thought was super, super cute. Really enjoyed that. And if you need a bit more saccharine in your life to go with that, this Thursday on ABC, 8 p.m., so April 16th, there's a Disney family sing-along with a whole bunch of people singing from home, all these different stars. I got to be honest, I saw John Stamos and I stopped there, but there are some other proper stars on there, like Josh Gad and Erin Andrews and like Christina Aguilera and Kenny Ortega and Donny Osmond, all these people. And they're all doing like, with the words on the bottom of the screen, their families all singing great Disney songs and stuff. So, you know, you're stuck at home, no one can hear you, no one can see you apart from your nearest and dearest. Well, why not? You know, just turn the volume up and start cranking out some tunes.
Yeah, I was going to open the window and see if I can get my neighbors to join in.
You know, why not? I mean, at the end of the day, with the cacophony that's out there on my doorstep every night at 6 o'clock, where people start hooting and hollering for all the first responders coming home, all the doctors and the nurses, shout out to those guys. Just keep it going. Just start with the scream and then just segue into a song and just let the songs continue. You'll probably get away with it. I'd like some footage of that, please, Regina.
Done.
In other Disney Plus news, they're doing a remake of Robin Hood. The guy who did Blind Spotting, Carlos Lopez Estrada, he did a whole bunch of music videos as well, like Billie Eilish recently. But most known for Blind Spotting. He's been attached to that. Rick and Morty writer Jeff Loveness has been attached to the Ant-Man 3 script or screenplay. That's still Peyton Reed come back to direct. So not much more information about that yet. It's really early days, except it's happening. While we're talking about sequels, though, Marvel sequels, this last week, I don't know if you caught it, Taika Waititi had a Thor Ragnarok watch-along on Instagram Live.
Fun.
Yeah, didn't actually watch a lot of the movie, not really. So it ends up being a bit more of a questions and answers thing. There's lots of highlights from this cropped all over the internet, and it really did seem like he was, you know, having fun with it. I like Taika Waititi anyway. I think a lot of people do. His sort of quirkiness, it kind of really appeals to me. There was a tweet that he posted earlier on today that I just absolutely loved. It gave me the giggles. Pausing for editing, and it reads, "My daughter just punched me so hard in the balls and won't apologize. She just said, well, I don't know," and walked off. Quarantine is going awesome. And I love that. But anyway, you know, his sense of humor is quite dry. And there was more of that on the old, the Instagram Live. He said, Thor, Love and Thunder, it's like 10-year-olds told us what should be in a movie, and we said yes to every single thing. Didn't talk too much about what Christian Bale will be doing in it. Wouldn't expand on the role of Tessa Thompson. Did say that there's more Meek, there's more Korg, and showed a whole bunch of pictures of Meek in new armor, like concept art, as well as one where he's wearing a real nice little like a jacket and pencil skirt. Oh. I have no idea. Also mentioned that he would like to fit in Beta Ray Bill, but not sure how he would, so probably not. Fat Thor is probably done.
That would be hard.
Yeah.
We need to at least have a scene where Korg's playing Fortnite.
Oh, yeah.
Again.
Something he did bring in from the Jason Aaron run of comics back in the day was the Space Sharks. He did confirm that they are going to be in it.
Yay.
And there was some epic trolling he did. If you look up Tony Stark Return, Taika Waititi script, you'll see he purports to show a script that shows Thor interacting with Tony Stark in Thor Love and Thunder. The whole thing is a bit clickbaity, but it was a fun read, and I'd encourage you to go and check it out. Quite honestly, I think after all's said and done, I think that's all I've got to say. It's for a new cycle where everyone's been trapped at home. There's been bits and pieces going on, my dudes.
Yeah,
seriously. The world still semi-turns.
Yeah, I heard that, you know, when they are finally ready to open the parks back up, it has been pondered the idea of taking people's temperatures as they try to enter the park.
I don't see why not. It's not with the type of thermometers they have, it's not like it's invasive. It's not like open your mouth like every single time. Like they've just got the quick thing. You just kind of...
You might be able to keep some people out if you said you were going to take it the other way.
Yeah. All right, son, bend over.
Maybe
Welcome
that's
to
how you qualify
Disneyland.
for a fast pass these days. When the lines are so backed up at Galaxy's Edge, trying to get on Rise of Resistance or trying to get into the Avengers campus. Only those, the most hardcore, are going to qualify for this particular visit.
You can't get into our Avengers campus till we get into yours.
Those pictures they take of you riding the rides really aren't going to have nearly the same effect if everybody's wearing a mask.
Yeah. I mean, I think the main problem that would occur if we were to have a real conversation about them taking temperatures would be people waiting in line a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And that would add up eventually. But I'm sure being Disney, they could find a way to streamline that.
Well, it would be a reason to hire some more people back because you're going to need more than a couple of people to be handling people of all ages coming through the line to get their temperatures taken before they can enter the park. But it's not a bad idea. I mean, it's a little inconvenience for the idea that you might not have to worry about getting sick while you're there.
Yeah. You just hope everyone's understanding about it.
Yeah, it's going to make people a bit cagey. I will say, even when it does open back up, you'd have to be really, really dedicated to, I think, feel like the benefits offset any risk you might assume getting straight back out there in the wild. I mean, good luck to you, but I think caution probably best heeded here.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, obviously one of the biggest and most anticipated shows hitting Disney Plus was the final season of Clone Wars. And I'm sure there are plenty, well, I know there are plenty of Star Wars podcasts and Disney podcasts that have talked about that final season. But not us. That's not what we're doing today. And in a way, there might be some advantages to that because you're going to have just that much more time to watch it if you haven't had a chance to watch it up to this point before we get to that. We're actually going to start with Clone Wars Season 2.
That's next on the Disney Plus Streamcast.
All right, well, let's talk about Clone Wars. Not just Clone Wars, but the second season of Clone Wars. One of the reasons why we're doing this is, I think, for one, it's just kind of fun to start at pretty close to the beginning and work our way through. I mean, if you're someone who religiously watched that show, this might be kind of fun just to dive back into it if you haven't watched the second season since maybe 2010 or in the last few years. And one of the reasons why we're not going to start with Season 1 perhaps helps explain why I had not seen Season 2 until I watched it for the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn, I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I know that might be surprising considering how big of a Star Wars fan I am, but there's a lot of reasons for this. Right around the time this was out and airing on TV, it was hard to make time to watch it, and we just weren't recording a lot of stuff back then. And the few times that I watched that first season, I thought it was neat, but I was just not like, oh my God, this is awesome. I got to make sure that I tune in every week. And that's just kind of the TV watcher that I am. It either hooks me that way or it doesn't. But ironically, the show really did change over time. And I think that's the other reason why we're going to start with 2, because my understanding was when the first season came out, it was really a George Lucas idea to give people some insight on the kind of things that happened during the Clone Wars, since you weren't going to get a lot of that between Episode 2 and Episode 3. So this was George's idea of saying, let's just show people some things that happened during the actual battles. And really, I think that first season was supposed to be just nothing with deep story arcs or, anything beyond that. It was just dropping you into a moment and then pulling you out, dropping you into a moment and then pulling you out. And I think that's one of the reasons why I had such a hard time getting engaged in it. Even when I would try to go back and start there, I struggled with it. And I know that over time, things really did begin to change. I mean, they really did start putting together some pretty heavy stories. And, of course, Ahsoka's popularity went through the roof, and it became a whole different series. So that's a couple of the reasons why I thought we would start with Tube. So I saw a lot of these for the first time. I think I'd seen the Cad Bane episodes already, but it was good to revisit those again. What about the two of you? Had you watched season 2 of this series, or had you watched it recently before we watched it for today's show?
So I had watched season 2, but not recently. And I came off of season 1 feeling very similar to the way you did. It seemed like there was some attempt at some multi-episode arcing in season 1, like with General Grievous's ship, but it still wasn't threaded through each episode well, so I just got constant whiplash for 20 some odd episodes. But then season 2 drastically changed it. The storylines got tighter, the arcing got better, Ahsoka got a lot less annoying and useless. It's just, it all just really started to become cohesive in season 2. So I remember I kept going into season 3, and then I thought I got through most of season 4 and into season 5, but actually I realize now that I didn't even finish season 4, because I remember the last thing I remember seeing was something about some Gungan shaman named Richelieu. And I just remember at the moment, I was just like, I do not care about this. And then I just haven't gone back. I got distracted. But the times when I'm invested in the show and really enjoying it, like in the thick of seasons 2 and 3, I really love it. So I'm really excited to talk about season 2 and the rest of the seasons. No need to talk any further about season 1. It was what it was.
Yeah.
It's been a minute for sure. My kids were never the biggest Star Wars fans growing up, and when this first aired, I was little kids. They sap your life and your energy, and when you get home, you put dinner on the table and you get them to bed and you go to bed, and then it all starts again in the morning. I remember seeing the landing on Geonosis and thinking, wow, this is actually pretty hardcore for what's, I guess, a kid's cartoon from when it aired and how it aired. There's a fair bit of death and destruction in that, and not even mild as well. Like some of these things aren't done off camera. When you see the flame troopers come out in the caves on Geonosis, you're like, wait, they're torching the bugs. and my 8-year-old is like, oh yeah, but it's not Beauty and the Beast, and you're like, okay, cool. So I was familiar with the characters, and I dipped into it, but it had been a really, really long time, so it was overdue. I did go back and watch season 1 as well, just because I knew there was a lot of General Grievous in it, and he's super cool. I love that dude. So, it was a very rewarding watch to go back through those 2 seasons, but especially when you get to like the Mandalorian bits in season 2, and you're sort of paying it forward for all the stuff we just watched on Disney Plus with the actual Mandalorian and the Darksaber. It was really, really rewarding. So yeah, I did enjoy it.
So as we look at, let's just say, the first 5 episodes, which is Holocron Heist, Cargo of Doom, Children of the Force, Senate Spy, and Landing at Point Rain. One thing that definitely got your attention the moment you start watching season 2, even if you started it back then, is the screen presence and coolness, I think, of Cad Bane, a brilliantly designed bounty hunter. I mean, you think about some of the characters that are really popular in Star Wars that appeared outside of the films, like maybe your Grand Admiral Thrawns or your Mara Jades. You got to figure that Cad Bane's probably in that category too. I mean, I remember going into a Star Wars toy shop a few months ago, and I mean, they even had a coat and a mask and a hat that you could buy if you wanted to dress like Cad Bane. I've also seen, obviously, some merchandise with him on it too. So he definitely gets your feet wet pretty effectively to start things off. But I really also liked Senate Spy, where you had Padme having to follow this potential separatist spy who's in the Senate, who she used to have a relationship with, and having her juggle, knowing he's a bad guy, but pretending having to pretend like you like him again while Anakin's there, and Anakin having to kind of keep himself back so she can do her job. That had a little bit of everything. That had you kind of conflicted about things. It had some nice, suspense to it. There were times where you were on the edge of your seat a couple of times as something was about to fall apart or happen. I think that was probably one of the strong episodes out of this group. I mean, I like Cad Bane. The stories that he was involved in were pretty good, but I mean, it was really kind of all about him. But as far as a standalone story, this one kind of gave Padme, kind of her own spotlight for this episode. And it also had some really cool moments, too, where, Anakin figured out a way to talk her into doing it by basically saying it's too dangerous for her. Mm-hmm. I thought that was kind of a nice touch. And then, the droid factory at Geonosis, where they go down there to try to blow that up in the 5th episode. I mean, that was pretty epic. And it's quite amazing, I think, when you look at some of the battles in these episodes, especially like that one, where you've got so much happening. I mean, even far, far back in the background, and all these droids and soldiers and blasters firing all at once, but things are actually happening. Things are actually getting hit. Things are being missed, and all kinds of stuff is happening. It's quite remarkable what...
Right, somehow it all still makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of my first impressions and kind of takeaways from those first 5 shows. What did you all think of those first 5?
So for me, I think the actual assault on the droid factory was probably, of those 5, my moment where I was like, oh, hell yeah. I enjoyed Senate Spy. I enjoyed all of the Padme-centered episodes more than I thought I would. Mm-hmm. Because generally, not that I don't like Padme, it doesn't do it for me the way other things do. So I figured they'd be okay, but that's how I knew season 2 was really tightening things up, because everything Padme did, I was just like, yep, this is right. This is awesome. I will say, watching Ahsoka really step it up in Cargo of Doom against Cad Bane, who completely underestimates her. He still ends up kind of getting one over on her, but not immediately, and not because she made a mistake, which would be very season 1 Ahsoka. I thought that was really, really cool. I really liked just the heistiness happening within the Jedi Temple, of all places, and seeing the other Jedi sort of figure it out in their own way. And I love the Jedi Librarian. But yeah, out of that 5, the moment that stands out to me is the actual assault on Geonosis.
Yeah, that bit's kind of awesome. It's almost like the animated version of Saving Private Ryan at the beginning, because it's just relentless. I grew up in the 80s where I got to watch Knight Rider and A-Team, and none of those people ever died.
Right.
If something blew up and a car flipped.
The cartoons were that way too. I don't think anybody ever died on G.I. Joe and stuff. Stuff would just blow out and you'd have a parachute or something.
Absolutely. And, you'd have a PSA at the end as well, or, hey kids, let's remember to wash your hands. This is Prince Adam of Eternia signing off, or whatever else, You'd have that bit. Even Skeletor, as evil as he was, you didn't actually see him ever kill anyone. And, oh my gosh, the lasers and everything. And just the way these things fly, like down the pipe at those poor ARC troopers. It's just the worst. But it's so gripping, and it just puts you right in the height of the action. I've got to be honest and say that I didn't much care for Senate Spy as far as the setup goes with the plot, but I did like Anakin's characterization in it, because all the terrible stuff that was going to come back to haunt him later on was when Master Yoda says Jedis don't form attachments, and there he is getting all super jealous and worked up and everything, and that's going to be the lever that gets used to pivot him towards the dark side later on by Palpatine. There's obviously they're doing this after the fact, so they get the benefit of telling the story with the beats that kind of resonate later on in the future. But that was done super, super well. My big takeaway, though, is if you look at the end of season 1 when they introduced Cad Bane, that was really kind of just a throwaway episode. It was out of place. It's almost like Star Wars or sci-fi nerds will know what I'm talking about, when they first brought Firefly onto TV and they showed them out of order, and they started with a heist, and the actual pilot came afterwards, and people were like, I don't get it. And they did it for the sake of the action, but it did nothing for the characterization. So when you first meet Cad Bane in season 1, he's kind of cool, but he doesn't really do anything. So to see him do more and actually get some of his arc out there and his characterization, even to the way he interacts with his droid. His droid's hilarious. That poor droid, that was really, really cool. And I know when they first conceived this, Cad Bane was initially going to be one of the heroes. He's going to be like the Han Solo of this whole thing, but apparently George Lucas had other plans for him. But just the way he's voiced, I guess Corey Burton picked Lance Henriksen as kind of an inspiration for the voice, because they couldn't actually get Lance Henriksen to do the role on the show, so he just thought he'd emulate it. And between that and just the stuff that he does, it's super cool. And it's one of those things that straight away from the get-go, it makes you want to watch it. It's so compelling. It's a really vital addition to the Star Wars canon. So it really is a great opening to the season.
Mm-hmm.
There were also really good moments throughout the entire season, even as early as this one, that gave a nod to things that you knew that were coming, or some foreshadowing, or just some nods to things you could attach to either Episode 2 or Episode 3. For example, the times when clearly Anakin made a much more of a dark side decision than a light side decision, just because it had to get done, or this person had to be taken out, or whatever. I really liked that aspect of the show too. Did you all notice some things like that?
Yeah, there was a time, I don't remember the exact context, but I remember my ear perked up. But somebody was talking about how Anakin sometimes did things sort of, against the way everyone else would normally want him to do it. Mm-hmm. And somebody was saying this to Chancellor Palpatine, and Palpatine just goes, well, I think it's great. And it's like, well, yeah, you would, wouldn't you? And then I think there was one that actually, it made me roll my eyes a little bit, because I thought it was just a little bit too on the nose. But Senator Organa was leaving a message for Obi-Wan.
Oh, yes.
And said, help us, Obi-Wan. And I was like, if he says you're our only hope right now. And obviously he did. And I was just like, all right, okay, all right. But still, it was cute, whatever.
Hey, he left out, this is our most desperate hour.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But still, Organa to Obi-Wan, you're our only hope. I feel like I may have seen that before.
Yeah, there's a few throwbacks like that in it, For the way I was binging those shows this week or over the last 10 days, if I had like a fifth of whiskey and had a drinking game for every time someone said, I've got a bad feeling about this, oh my, I'd be bladdered. But, that's all part of the fun, isn't it? You're going to have to help me out with it. I forget. I think it's season 2, but there's a bit where Anakin starts slapping around that dude and starts torturing him as well, right? In order to get the information out of him.
Oh, yeah, because he's like, you're not going to use that Jedi mind trick on me. And he's like, I don't need to.
Yeah, I don't need to.
And you're just like, oh, damn.
And he did give up the information. I was like, how did you do it? He goes, I just did it.
Yeah.
All right, so episode 6 through 10. Weapons Factory. This is when Luminaras and Anakin work together while their Padawans do the other half of the mission, still at the Separatist droid factory. We have Legacy of Terror. Luminara is missing, and they have to go search for her, and there's all those undead Geonosians in the caves. Then there's 8, which is Brain Invaders.
Ooh.
This is when Ahsoka and Barriss Offee are trying to stop that plague from going around, which I think is also tied to... I mean, you really had 3 here that were all kind of tied to the whole Weapons Factory that ended with Episode 5. Then we get back into General Grievous in Episode 9. He captures a Jedi named Eth Koth, and Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Adi Gala. That's the other thing I like about the show, is it gives us a chance to see some of these other Jedis. You've got Luminara and Dooley, Adi Gala, and Barriss Offee. You get all these Jedi that, in the films they might have gotten a moment, in the shot, and that was it. Kit Fisto smiles and runs off. You actually see him talk and interact a little bit in this show. So we have Grievous Intrigue, that's number 9, and then finally 10. I really liked this one. As far as an episode where you're kind of getting away from the battle and you're just kind of telling a story, episode 10 was The Deserter. And that's the one when Rex gets injured in battle and he meets a clone who, for all intents and purposes, deserted the clone army and is living a life on his own. And that just gave a whole nother perspective and depth to who these characters are and that they're not just these all programmed one way, looking the same way type people that, are built for one thing and can only do one thing, that they still have the capability of making their own choices. It kind of, in a way, makes you think a little bit of all the stories we get about humans and the dangers of creating life or creating AI, when the AI decides to finally start having a consciousness for itself and making its own choices. I think it's kind of similar in that. So I thought the amount of time they spent on Geonosis and the droid factory was kind of interesting, as they gave really 4 characters a lot of depth in their stories, and then the whole plague and the zombie Geonosis thing was kind of creepy. But I really liked episode 10 when it came to just kind of breaking away from the battle and kind of telling another just kind of nice little side story about this deserting clone and his family and kind of the relationship that he and Rex have, despite the fact they see things differently.
I really loved this one because it showed that now they've figured out how to put in standalone episodes without feeling like it's just a pocket universe. It feels like it's actually expanding upon one story. It all feels, coagulated together in a really, really awesome way. And like you said, these little standalones are now really leading to the development of the larger story, both in this show and the actual Star Wars universe itself. And I really, really loved it. The ones that really stood out for me were predominantly Brain Invaders, but also Weapons Factory and Legacy of Terror leading up to it. Because it seemed like Clone Wars was almost dipping into some darker horror aspects, because those things were terrifying, if I'm being really honest. And the Geonosian Queen, she's creepy. The voice actress that did that character is incredible. But just the entire situation when Barriss gets possessed and basically, is asking Ahsoka to kill her, and it looks like she did it. It's just one of those things that's just so incredibly tense. And I also really liked getting to watch Anakin interact with Luminara, talking about their Padawans. That time when Luminara was asking Anakin, when the time comes, I'm prepared to let my student go. Can you say the same?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, obviously no. Because I believe in her. And then you see Ahsoka say, hey, I can't make it out. And then that Star Wars music starts, and then she sets off that explosion. And I was in tears. I was like, she's a real Jedi, man. She really is.
Nice.
And it was terrifying. It was heart-wrenching. It was exciting. Then it rounds off with some really awesome General Grievous stuff after you come off of this horrible Brain Invaders thing. And General Grievous, all of his goons just get straight headshots, man.
Yeah.
Every single time. Like, it's a rough fight. It really is. But I loved these episodes.
Yeah, Brain Invaders is the one where Anakin does the torture. He does the force choke on Poggle to get him to spill the beans.
Yep.
Yeah, which isn't the first torture scene we've gotten this season, which is crazy. I mean, and I think it was like the first episode, they tortured that Jedi so he would open the holocron, and it shows the entire torture sequence. It shows him die, and then they show him drop his body on the ground. And I'm just like, okay, this is a kid's show.
But what's cool about the Anakin one is that when he does it, you hear that refrain, that riff from the Imperial March. It kind of like fades in and out just as quick as it comes, it goes. You like you say, you get that sense that something's building, something's rising, and all that just makes it just that much more enjoyable. It doesn't feel like a cash in. I know toys are such a big part of animating things and kids things these days. There's that word that's used to describe them. They have to be toyetic. You have to be able to sell merch off the back of these to make them work. It's a real word. It's a real word. I forget who it was back in the day. I'm going to Google it. Who said that all his stuff has to be toyetic in order to, justify it. It was a term attributed to Bernard Loomis, who's a toy development executive for Kenner, talking about opportunities for marketing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, saying that he told Spielberg it wasn't toyetic enough, so he went and bought the Star Wars license instead. He didn't want Close Encounters because he wasn't going to sell any toys off of it. So despite the knock that all these new properties have, that we're just trying to sell some stuff, then Lord knows I've bought most of it. It's still got so much to offer. It's moving the story forward for fans of the movies, for fans of the book. That extended canon that You know, when they did this series, they wiped the last Clone Wars series off the slate and said, yeah, that's gone. We're starting fresh. We're doing it again. And you can see why, because it's just opening up that universe and giving you so much more to enjoy. Like you say, the other interactions with the other Jedi, so you learn more about their culture and their rules and their customs. The camaraderie between the clones, which you don't really see a lot of it, but that is the lifeblood of these episodes. With Rex and Cody. It's so awesome to see that interaction, and just there's a bit that comes up recurrently where they're brothers. They don't do betrayal. They stand together. They're brothers. The best soldier is the one that you're a better soldier if you have a soldier next to you. You're stronger again, and they speak of that familial connection again, coming back in The Deserter when he talks about you've got your family and I've got mine. It's important, and you see more of that. They're not just throwaway, disposable characters, and that's what I love about these episodes. That it just gives you so much more to work with in the canon.
You imagine what it's like going into the voice booth, and your job is to voice Poggle the Lesser.
I mean, there's a lot of these characters where I'm like, man, that is some interesting voice work. That must have looked really interesting in the booth.
Well, apparently there's two people who can do it, because in the movie Attack of the Clones, the guy who voiced him was the same guy that played Quinn in Into the Badlands.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Or even like Matthew Wood, who, does Grievous, he does all the droids.
Yeah, right.
How you do all those droid lines without kind of like cracking up?
I know.
Outtakes on that must be crazy. The droids again. Same. And then that's the beauty of it as well. What they do for the clones in these episodes, in these series, they do for the droids as well. You get such a great, you feel sorry for them. You feel bad, whenever they have that impending sense of doom, like something out of a Warner Brothers cartoon, like whenever Wile E. Coyote goes off the edge of the cliff, and they have that uh-oh kind of moment.
Yeah.
And you just feel bad, even though they're raining death and destruction on loads of people. Whenever you see something falling from the sky on them, or Ahsoka's about to take their heads off with a one trusty swipe of a lightsaber, it's like, man, you just feel so sympathetic. And
sorry, little guy.
Yeah, right.
Bleep bloop or whatever.
So he does such a great job with those, and it's not even just the regular rank and file as well. Whenever they have those TX droids, the command ones, that first started out like something from Battlestar Galactica, but each appearance by one has its own nuance, its own sort of personality in the voice, just evil enough to make you believe it, but just kind of cheeky enough to kind of make you feel sort of, again, you empathize with them. It's just tremendous work.
All right. Well, as we get into episodes 11 through 15, the very first one is kind of another, let's run off to the side here and tell this story. This is when Ahsoka loses her lightsaber on Coruscant and hires this elderly Jedi to go track down who stole this from her. And it's actually, I think it's kind of a fun little story, but even more so, every time in that story you think she was on the verge of getting it back, something would happen and she'd have to continue the chase. If anything, you had a pretty extravagant chase scene. And of course, having it on Coruscant is going to give you all kinds of options to have, the little cars flying through and all the scenery and the buildings, and then you have the underworld. There's just so many places to run, and I think they took full advantage of it in that episode. And then we have episodes 12, 13, and 14, which is all about Death Watch, Mandalore, and Obi-Wan investigating what's happening over there and realizing that while Mandalore wants to stay neutral, Death Watch is trying to go another direction. We do see the Darksaber in this series. And then we wrap it up on episode 15 with Senate murders, and it's kind of a whodunit with Padme trying to figure out who killed this senator. And that was another one of those kind of interesting stories that kind of gave Padme a spotlight as well, as she was trying to figure out who killed this other senator. And there were all kinds of people in a typical whodunit. It was a typical situation where you could sit there and watch it and think, oh, it could be them, it could be them, oh, it could be them. But I think the meat of this group has to be the Mandalore stories, because, this is an area before this show aired that, like we talked about when we had our general discussion about The Mandalorian, there hasn't been a whole lot of ground covered when it comes to the Mandalorians. There's even references to Jango Fett in that story, I believe, and they were like, that's, Jango Fett did not represent who we are. And I bet even then it was nice to, get a story about this, since definitely back in 2009 there wasn't a whole lot, at least visually, covered. And I really like this idea of these group of Mandos forming a terrorist group that are trying to overthrow the current Chancellor and turn things another direction for Mandalore. What did you all think of this group?
So Lightsaber Lost for me was a little bit weak, just because, I thought it was, again, a real season 1 Ahsoka move to lose her lightsaber that way. But I did enjoy Master Sunube. I thought he was really cute. He had a really cool sort of Mr. Miyagi thing where he's like, no, you got to slow down or we're never going to find what you're looking for. That kind of really
a lightsaber.
Yeah, just that sort of really stuff, like things that's really frustrating for somebody who's learning to hear, but he ends up being right. And at the end of the episode, you see her, explain to the younglings what she's learned. I thought that was cute. The Mandalore plot, Voyage of Temptation and Duchess of Mandalore, I freaking loved these episodes. I love the Duchess. I love the way Clone Wars expands on the new characters. I love how it's showing us that Mandalore is going to be, obviously a really key place in the Clone Wars. Maybe not necessarily completely politically, but at least, location-wise, there's a lot going on. Showing sort of neutral territories, people that aren't with the Separatists or the Republic, I think is interesting, because it shows something that's really good about Clone Wars in that it can show us more of this war than we ever would have been able to see in a film. We're seeing all sides of this thing. We're seeing all kinds of different stories, and that includes people that are neutral, people that don't want to be involved. And like she said, there's, hundreds of planets that are, under her rule, her neutral rule, and they're involved in this just as much as anybody else in a way. And it was also interesting to see, the Republic almost be viewed as an enemy force coming in, when that's not really how we would perceive it at all. And then the Senate murders, I thought it was fun. It was a, pretty good Padme episode. That guy that came in to try to solve it, I thought he was really funny.
He reminded me of John Lovitz.
Yeah, something like that. But that I could have sort of taken it or left it, but it didn't throw a kink in the season or anything. It was just after I had just come off of the 3-episode Mandalore stuff, I was just like, all right, cool. I guess I can relax for a minute.
Yeah, the other thing about Lightsaber Lost, too, is it was also kind of a nod to Attack of the Clones, the whole, this is your life. Saying the lightsaber, don't lose this is your life. That's something that Obi-Wan says to Anakin in Attack of the Clones. So that was kind of a revisiting of that phrase. I guess kind of giving a nod to the fact that, the Jedi, that's how they view it, and that those terms are probably used a lot. And then also another thing about the Mandalore plot in that storyline, it was kind of interesting to see the relationship between her and Obi-Wan and kind of get a glimpse of something they had in their past, something you don't typically think about when you think of Obi-Wan. And that was another thing that this series can do, is show you some things that went on maybe at an early time or a different time that you might not have known before.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that it did really well, because, hashing out these new characters is something Clone Wars does really well. But as we saw, it's doing a really good job of, fleshing out characters that are old familiars that we love, like Obi-Wan, and sort of seeing the weakness at the knees that he gets when Satine is around, and how necessarily he's not as level-headed when it comes to women as he tries to be perceived to Anakin, I think.
Most of my Mandalorian knowledge comes from Star Wars Rebels, which, leans on the Darksaber and the feuding between the houses on Mandalore, like pretty heavily with the character of Sabine in its later seasons. And so to go back in and watch where like that kind of came from, that was neat. As someone who really enjoyed The Mandalorian, to see that, the Vizsla character was voiced by Jon Favreau in that show, the guy with the heavy machine gun and the jetpack. and it's still Jon Favreau back when it's pre-Vizsla back in the day with his Darksaber. That was cool. The other thing that I take from that as well is that, you'd always heard about, Mandalorian super commandos being like just the baddest in the galaxy, like they're the toughest, they are just like amazing. And you don't really get to see a lot of it, because you see Jango being the archetype for the clones in the trilogy. You don't really get to see a lot of Boba. I know people love him, he's got great armor, but he doesn't actually do a lot apart from die in an embarrassing way in Jedi. So to actually see the Mandalorians for the first time just hold their own against Jedi, and in fact even kind of have the upper hand to some degree. I know like Obi-Wan, and he has to use his like force pushes to kind of keep his combatants at bay whenever he's fighting. Like he's not strong enough to go one-on-one with these guys. Vizsla's Darksaber skill is just as good as his lightsaber skill. It's really cool to see these people be represented as the Force and kind of be portrayed with that sort of that weight, that gravitas, the seriousness that they need in order to be kind of properly feared. So that was really, really fun. I totally enjoyed that callback. As far as Senate murders go, I mean, not my favorite, but I think anything that Tom Kenny voices, I've always been a fan of his since, with SpongeBob. He does Devo in that, and he again just makes that character super goofy and just watchable. And yeah, it's like if John Lovitz was Columbo and kind of like quite amiable because of that, even though he doesn't mean to be. So yeah, that was fun. All of those episodes, I think there's not a lot of filler in the season 2, and even the bits that do kind of suck have some really important like characterization or some plot beats for later on that you'd be glad to watch. You'd be sad if you missed them. But
right, nothing's completely useless.
Right. Even the standalones, they give you so much depth and interest. But certainly the Mandalorian episodes, if you're a fan of the Mandalorian and you hadn't seen any of Rebels, maybe you don't do anything with the extended universe or the canon, go back and watch these ones, because they are quite rewarding and will give you some clues as to what's going on with that, and things that you maybe can expect coming down the line in season 2 of The Mandalorian.
All right, so the last group, 16 through 22, is Cat and Mouse, Bounty Hunters, the Zillo Beast Strikes Back, Death Trap, R2 Come Home, and Lethal Takedown. The Cat and Mouse episode is where they are trying to get supplies to this planet called Christophsis, and there's this commander, Admiral Trench, who's basically, to me, looks like a spider that can talk.
He is the worst.
Yeah, and it's pretty, if you don't like spiders, it's really kind of creepy watch, especially when he goes...
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
You remind me of the bad guy from Monsters Inc.
Yes!
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it's a nod to that guy. Well, I mean, the fact that he's pretty terrifying, he's also very, very smart. I mean, and that's the other thing that I also like when we're talking about new characters that get introduced. I mean, we already know how good a lot of our heroes are at their jobs, but this guy had some history. Where people thought he was dead, and it was important to think that because he was so cunning and smart and so deadly, and that added a whole nother layer to the trouble he was causing. And the cloaked ship, I thought, was interesting too, and that was another moment where Anakin had a choice to make. He could either do what he wanted to do, which was turn around and attack, or he could fly down and provide those supplies, but he decides to attack, and you can tell that it's something that darn near backfires on him. And I thought for a minute, too, that cloaking in Star Wars, I associate that so much more with Star Trek. But I did stop and think about Empire Strikes Back when Han makes that maneuver and looks like he's going to attack that Star Destroyer and goes right at it and disappears. And obviously, we all know, latched onto the back of it. And the first thing the guys tracking him say, can't just have disappeared because no ship that small has a cloaking device. So clearly it existed in their universe. I just don't know if we'd ever seen it until perhaps maybe this episode. So a lot of really, really interesting things came out of Cat and Mouse.
There's some cloaking in Battlefront 2.
That is true. There is cloaking in Battlefront 2. It's been a while since I've played that, so yes, that's very, very true. Episode 17, Bounty Hunters. This is when Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka join these bounty hunters that are hanging out with these group of farmers. It kind of reminded me of that episode of The Mandalorian when they come up on that village and try to defend it from attackers, from pirates. It reminded me a lot of that one.
Me too.
The Zillo Beast one, this was another thing between 18 and 19. There was a lot to this too, because first off, this creature ends up being supposedly the last of its kind. It had buried itself under the ground and was living until the Republic dropped this bomb that created a sinkhole, and out comes this monster. It definitely had, throughout this whole thing, where after a while, as both sides were trying to manipulate it for its own gain, you started to really feel for the creature, which I thought was really, really effective on that front. But the other thing that we got is just a hint of what again, foreshadowing. We know what's coming. You saw the Jedi's attitude about things related to keeping the beast alive. And then you had Palpatine, who's like, it's just a monster, kill it. So there were those two aspects of the story. And then as we get into 2021 and 22, a couple of things I really liked about this. I love the fact they brought Boba Fett back. And he is voiced by Daniel Logan in these 3 episodes. And this idea that through these episodes that Boba is trying to get back at Mace Windu for killing Jango. And then later we also have the cool moment where we also get Aurra Sing and Boss, who are hanging out with him on Slave One. I really liked that whole story. I bet it was a lot of fun to sit down and talk about, what if Boba Fett were to come back, sneak back in as a clone and trying to get back at Mace Windu. I love the idea, and I like what they did with it. The other thing I liked, too, about episode 21 was just the idea of giving R2 his own hero story.
I loved that. I really did. I enjoyed Cat and Mouse. Bounty Hunter stood out to me because of the exact same reason you said. It was reminiscent of that episode of The Mandalorian. I really liked that conversation where Obi-Wan was sort of trying to explain that, we can't just, help and intervene in whatever we want. But then obviously he ends up getting involved. The Zillo Beast episodes were rough for me because I do not like Godzilla movies and things like that because I can't stand watching a bunch of humans misunderstand this creature, that's sort of just trying to exist. That kind of thing just really stresses me out. But I really like what you mentioned about showing sort of the difference in methods and opinions between the Jedi and the Senate, because the Jedi, they're saying, we can't kill something that's innocent, especially if it's the last of its kind. But then you've got Palpatine who's like, by all means, kill it, whatever. It shows that there's, deep spirituality to the Jedi that we already knew was there, but it was just another way for us to really, really see it, despite how much of a threat the Zillo Beast was. But then watching the Zillo Beast Strikes Back, I was just infuriated because they were just doing horrible things to this creature. And then it ends up dying in the end. I was really hoping for it to be one of those really nice endings, and we just didn't get it because out of everything that happens in the Star Wars universe, how crazy and bonkers insane it can be sometimes, at the end of the day, it is largely realistic. And you see a lot of that in Clone Wars because you are in the middle of a giant galactic war and things are tense. You don't have time to really sit here and consider what one animal, may or may be useful alive or dead. You've really got to just sort of keep things moving. And it was just another casualty of this war and the evil of Palpatine, basically. And then Death Trap, I really liked just because I loved Boba Fett coming back, even though he's a little young and a little bratty, and that kind of thing kind of irritates me. I wish maybe they had waited until he was a little bit older before they brought him back. But the way they did it, I thought was really good. This kid seemed like just the nastiest, and it was really, really awesome. I loved the R2 episode. I loved the moment that he had with Mace Windu at the end when Mace Windu was like, I really understand why you like this droid. Good job. And he really did. He really clutched it that entire episode. And then for Lethal Trackdown, Boba Fett ending up coming face to face with Mace Windu and, not being able to achieve his goal. It was a great way to end the season.
Yeah. I think fans who watch the prequels already know you really shouldn't underestimate R2-D2. I will never forget sitting in the theater when those super battle droids were approaching him, and he just flew up in the air and put a bunch of oil on the ground. They slipped and fell down, and then he set them ablaze.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Everybody
when he was fighting
laughing
that
and
creature
cheering.
in that dump, and he was just like dumping oil and shooting it with his little ropes, and it was just amazing.
Cat and Mouse, I enjoyed the episode. I wish they hadn't killed off Trench, really.
Yeah.
For someone who's purported to be really amazing, I felt like that he could have been a Thrawn character and, been a thorn in their side for a long time. It's interesting we say Trench. Originally, his name was going to be Admiral Trench, as in Tarantula. And if you look at his, when they pull up his military record on screen when Admiral Wolf is doing that, or Yularen, actually in Aurebesh, it says Tranche. They changed it at the last minute. And yeah, it's scary. I hate spiders. So the first time I saw him with those little mandibles going and those little twitchy eyes, I stood up and pulled my chair back a little bit and sat a little bit further away from the screen because, not a fan. But yeah, that was neat. And I think, in terms of the cloaking, why don't people do cloaking? Well, because he said there's a magnetic frequency, I guess, or a signature that they can lock onto, so it doesn't really do you any good.
Yeah.
So I like the throwaway explanation for why you don't as well. That kind of made sense. I mean, it's all space magic, but it kind of made sense in terms of the canon. That's why you wouldn't. What's the point? The Bounty Hunters one, I really enjoyed. I guess that one was intended to be an homage to Akira Kurosawa, who did, Seven Samurai back in the day, which Magnificent Seven was based on, about, the seven samurai who defended the town from bandits back in feudal Japan. And Lucas apparently loved Kurosawa, and that was a big inspiration for him for Star Wars. And so that's why at the end of the episode it comes out, this is dedicated to, and it aired on his what would have been his 100th birthday. So that one was kind of especially resonant, and that was a fun one as well. Especially the little guy in the big battle suit. That was kind of fun. Zillo Beast, yeah, that's
rough.
I don't know what to say about that. What I like about that as well, you get, again, we talk about having these levers that turn people to the dark side, and no one's out and out evil. There's a reason for it. And again, with Palpatine, whenever the Jedi say, well, morally, we're not up for destroying the beast, Palpatine comes back with, well, it's my moral duty to save millions of people and to stop people from dying right now. Again, it's always couching it in these terms that you can kind of get behind, the same way he turned Skywalker into his apprentice. It's never just kind of, come with me and let's be evil. No, there's always a methodology, like there's always some sense behind it, and it's cool you get to see that. And again, I guess the little glimpses behind the subterfuge that exist, but people start to realize that maybe he's not all he's cracked up to be. Like even now, like the Doctor, who's like, you want me to clone that creature?
What?
Yeah. There was actually a Kylo Ren comic that came in to time with the last movie where he fights a Zillo Beast. There's one left out in the Outer Rim.
There you go.
And and he actually, spoilers, you're not going to read it. He actually pulls a Drax because you can't get in there with a lightsaber. He actually gets swallowed up by the Zillo Beast and guts it from the inside with his lightsaber, and does the one thing that his grandfather couldn't do, and that's how he gets the respect of the people that he's trying to subdue and the troopers that he's with him, because he did take on the Zillo Beast and it wasn't a thing for him. So being that's where I first saw that the Zillo Beast was in the comics, and to actually watch it this time around, that was kind of cool. And I guess I don't know, the thing I liked about the Boba Fett episodes really was, again, that you got to see Aura Singh and Bossk, which was a complete surprise to me, and I loved that. And the way that they kind of kept it kind of hidden for so long, they maintained the suspense of it to a degree, wherever the kids are out in the pod and it's floating, and then you see that silhouette coming, like go to dock up against them, and then it changes perspective, and you actually see Slave One, and you're like, oh no, I know who that is. That's
Yes.
the reveal.
Oh.
And so, being that I'm one of those guys who I don't want people to spoil stuff for me, I'll read the spoiler so I know, so you can't, do me dirty. I went into that and didn't know, and so when I saw that, I was like, oh no, and I started shouting, and the cat jumped off my lap and all of that, and it was worth it. It was worth the clawing I got. It was really cool. The whole series is good. From the bits that I watched, I enjoyed it. But going back through and doing this deep dive, I mean, I didn't feel like I was bored with any of it. All those episodes, especially the last few, it's as quickly and with the pace that it starts, so it ends. It doesn't let up. It's solid all the way through. And I think that's my big takeaway from season 2, is just how consistently bloody good it is. It's really, really cool.
Right? Like, I really stand by it. Like, even the Padme episodes didn't bore me. And that was something that I really, always expected to happen. And I think it, not just with Padme, but every scene that took place in the Senate in Clone Wars, I've liked more than any of the things that I saw take place in the Senate in the prequels.
Well, and I obviously have a lot of friends and colleagues who are Star Wars fans who have watched this thing all the way through. And I have a feeling that a lot of them, if they were listening, and I'm sure some of them will listen, hearing us talk about the dark moments and the deep dives and the special appearances, I think they would all say the best is yet to come, because I know there are some darker things coming, and there are some surprises coming, among other things, as we get into the other seasons leading up to the final season, which of course just hit Disney+. Well, that will wrap up today's episode discussing Clone Wars Season 2. In a few weeks, we will come back and talk about Clone Wars Season 3 as we work our way to that final season. In the meantime, next week we're going to do something really fun, and I think very timely, since I think a lot of us right now who are big fans of the parks hate the fact that it's closed, especially if you live close by and you have the opportunity to go there often. You immediately miss it the moment it's not there or the moment you can't go. So we're going to spend some time talking about some of those great rides at the theme parks. And you might be asking, how does that tie into Disney+? Well, we know that a lot of those rides tie directly to the movies, both old and new. And in fact, here in recent years, they've taken some of the rides and turned them into movies. So we're going to talk a little bit about how those rides tie to movies and vice versa with a special guest who is not only a Disney expert, but he's also an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and of course the host of Walt Disney World Radio. Lou Mongello will join us for that discussion next week, and I hope you will too. In the meantime, remember, we are online on Twitter at Disney Plus Cast and at DisneyPlusStreamcast.com. Thank you so much for listening today, and we hope you'll join us next week for another episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast.